While working on your facial features, you'll see we have some photos, some drawings, and then the boxes that are same sizes as your photos and the drawings next to them. Make sure when you start sketching out each of these different features that you're also trying to do them in the same size as the ones that are given examples of to the left. You can use either the photo option or you can use the drawing option to copy. That part is up to you. But you always want to start with those basic contour lines or outlines, and then you can always tilt your pencil onto the side to start adding in some of that shading. You can use your drawing pencils if you have those in your kit, or you can use a regular number 2 HB pencil that you may have around the house. Do not use mechanical pencils for shading. They don't come out well, they are highly reflective, and they're very difficult to see. Be careful that you're making all of the areas that are dark really dark. So if you rub something out to blend it a little bit and it gets too faded, go back in, make those darker lines and creases really dark, almost all the way down to black where they need to be for this project to work out right. You're going to go through and keep working the areas back and forth, getting it just how you want it. Remember where all of the parts are rounded. If you take a look at your own eye or facial features in the mirror and you can feel them with your finger, you'll notice that they're each bumpy and different in different locations. And you want to make sure that you have a dark area, a mid-tone area, and then a white or close to white reflective area for each of those rounded spaces. So your eyelid's going to have that nice little cylindrical type shape to it, but it's going to be more of that rainbow or arc as you're going through it. Don't forget you do have eyelashes in there, and your eyelashes are different thicknesses, so you can have some thinner ones and some thicker ones. Again, this would be more with your B pencils if you have any drawing pencils around. Otherwise, you might have to go back in and darken some of them up. You also have lashes on the bottom of your eye. Make sure that they go in there, and they do go from shorter to longer as you go across. Your eyeball itself is rounded inside that orbit that you have in your skull. So you need to make sure that what would even be considered typically the white or pink parts of your eye also have that spherical shape. So you're going to have some shading on both sides of that sphere within your eye. The iris itself is round, but it doesn't always show the entire roundness because typically the top part of your eye is covered with your eyelid, so part of it's covered, and then usually a little bit of the bottom part of your iris is also covered by your bottom lid. So you want to make sure that those are completely under the areas they need to be. For the colored part, make sure you're watching reflections, right? We have nice, shiny, wet eyeballs, so they tend to have some white reflective areas. Again, they're going to go from a deeper color to a lighter color as they work their way down across the sphere of your eye. You can go in and put those little tiny iris lines around the edges, and they work their way in towards the center of the eye. But the pupil in the middle is a nice, smooth, solid black. It's not really black. It's a hole that goes into your eye to allow light in. But because you don't have any lights inside your head, it appears black because it's dark inside of there. So you can go back in and shade those. And then you can futz and putz a little bit around things and get the shading just right. Again, you can see there's a nice dark line where those lashes are coming out and the eyelid closes over the eye. And there's also that bottom lid. A little bit of shading outside and around for those orbital areas, again, down along the cheekbones. And if something gets too dark, you can also go back in and erase it a little bit. I always use my finger for blending. And I erase anything that goes outside the box just to keep my paper nice and neat. When you're working on the nose, everybody's nose is a little different. The photo nose and the drawing nose, you can tell are two different noses on here. I'm going to go ahead and follow the drawing nose just because it's right next door and it's easier. Everybody's nostrils are a little bit different shape. The point of their nose is a little higher or lower. Sometimes they are narrower or wider, so how close they are to your face or how far away from your face it extends can be different. And the bridges, as they work their way up towards your eyebrows, tend to be a lot different. So you really want to take a look at those shapes. Make sure that you're recognizing that, yes, your nostrils are big, wide holes, but generally speaking on the nose, they're going to have a little bit of an elliptical or sideways curl to them because you're not looking straight up somebody's nose. In the photo, they would be more rounded if you were drawing them, but in the one that's already been drawn, the nostrils are more downward because the nose is a little bit flatter. The best way to keep in mind when you're drawing noses and how to think of them is it's really kind of almost three spheres, right? You have the tip of your nose is one big sphere. Each of your nostrils is a tiny sphere that's connected to your nose. And then you have that cartilage or the bridge bone underneath that comes down from your eyebrows or your orbital sockets towards all the cartilage that's kind of bendy at the end of your nose. So we indicate that with shadows. There is no hard, fast line there because you don't have a hard rectangular edge on your face. So you're always blending those shadows out from the most reflective points in the middle of your nose and on those two nostril spheres out into your cheekbones. So that's why people tend to have some trouble with noses and nostrils, because they aren't thinking of them as nice soft gradations for those shadows. They're trying to draw them as hard lines, and they're not really hard lines. So again, a lot of blending with this, a lot of going back in, adding more shading. It takes a lot more than you would think for noses. A lot of people try and do them really light and gentle when they should have some darker spaces to them. So push firmly. If you get too much in there while you're blending, you can always go back in with your eraser, erase a little bit out, or if you stretch something too far, you can go back and take it out a little bit. Again, keeping in mind those 3 different spheres, right? Tip of the nose and 2 nostrils in there. Now for lips, again, these are something that are a little different for everybody. Sometimes you have thin lips on the top, you have thicker lips on the top. Sometimes they're equal between the two. You would have to really pay attention to the lips that you are drawing, but you always start with the contour line, and sort of that little M shape generally is something that everybody has. You start losing the defined upper lip as you get older in age. So people that you draw that are older will have less of a defined upper lip, while people who are younger have a more defined upper lip. You want to make sure you get that little divot under the nose that goes in there. That also helps you to define the lips as far as adding in some of the shading goes. Sometimes those are soft and gentle. Sometimes they're a little deeper. Again, depends on who you're drawing. And all lips are rounded out and down back towards the chin. So they're coming out of the mouth, around the lip, and then back towards the chin. So keep that in mind. There'll be a little shadow that comes underneath those lips most of the time, since they're breaking the light that's shining down on them. And they also have those nice little vertical lines in there that go up and down. Typically you don't see them very often unless you're really close to somebody, or if somebody's lips are chapped, you'll notice that they're in there. So you want to accentuate those when you're doing your shading by doing some of those vertical lines as part of your shading. Make sure you're using those vertical lines on the lips. It's a shallow C on the left and a shallow backward C type shape on the right. They don't go exactly straight up and down when you're working those. And when you have that nice little shade coming out from the lips, since they bow back inwards towards the mouth, it'll be a little bit darker there, and it'll also have a little bit of that zigzag to connect to some of those lines. You can always go back in and deepen some of the shading and shadows if you need to. For the ear, I was initially looking at the drawing portion of this, but I changed my mind and decided I was going to work with the photograph. It would be a little easier to work with. It's a little bit more rounded. Everybody's ears are different in shape, so when you're drawing ears, you need to pay close attention to what those shapes are, where the nooks and crannies are. Is their earlobe attached to the side of their head, or is it detached? That's a genetic difference you'll see in some earlobes and ears. Are they really long and skinny and tall, or are they a little bit wider? Of course, the darkest part's going to be the ear canal, so it's going to be very heavily shaded down in there. It doesn't have any light coming out of it. You'll work towards your midtones and then your lighter highlighted areas. I do a lot of blending with my pencil and my fingers for this particular one, because most of the ear is just that. It's a lot of blended sections to show how round and curved everything is. Again, these curves are going to be dependent upon the person and their ear shape. They are all different. There is no generic ear shape, other than the fact that it's generally a C shape attached to the side of the head. But the length, the width, the depth, that's all dependent upon the person that you are drawing. So look carefully and closely at those. You'll also notice that a lot of what helps the ear to pop is the fact that it's shadowed in the background, most often by hair or clothing that the person has. Sometimes you'll also see sideburns or whiskers.